Hi, everybody. We have a really special guest today, a perfect guest for the times we're in, Sherrie Dillard, author of the book, I'm Still With You. We're going to be talking about the subject of the grace and the beauty in passing over to the other side from both ends of the story. So first of all, Sherrie's been doing this for over 30 years, and she's done over 50,000 mediumship readings. And this is a lot of experience and is very practical and calm in the way she explains to us the variety of the experiences that happen to us when we arrive on the other side. So let's go to Sherrie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I wanted to talk to you because, I have friends call me. One of my friends lost in a year 6 men in her life, and half of them were young men in their 30s, overdoses, car accidents. Other people that I hear from in our community are losing family members and friends and children. Again, ODs, suicides, COVID. I don't think any of us has ever seen a time like this when so many people are leaving the earth and in the most unexpected ways. And so this is right up your alley. So I would love for you to comment on, in the large picture, what you're seeing right now and what it's looking like on the other side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I have found that, I would say it started a little bit, I noticed before pre-COVID, just a bit pre-COVID, I noticed there were many more, especially younger people passing over too, or I would say younger as in for me, younger, which would have been in the 20s, 30s, around there, maybe 40s. But and then COVID, of course, the desperation, the stress, the hopelessness, the confusion that we are collectively having and have had now for several years has just kind of opened the floodgates almost in a way, and people are passing over, like you said, in numbers that, this consistency over more than 2 years, 3 years about, I haven't ever seen anything like this. And I've given a lot of thought to it. And one of the things I've noticed talking to people who have passed over during this time is that people are, in my experience, more conscious. It's kind of in our energy now. We're not talking about it. We're not grounding it enough to necessarily have conversation about what's happening in that way, but it's still present to us. And unfortunately, because we're not talking about it and processing what's happening in our psyche with everything happening and the degree of anger and frustration and picking sides and all of the stress that collectively we feel every day, it almost makes it a little bit bigger and a little worse because we have no outlet for it.
Right.
And that is accumulating energy, that stress. And in some people who really are sensitive, especially, and not having an outlet to understand what's happening, unfortunately, I've had more so than ever, one of the things people on the other side are telling me who have passed over is that the activities they were doing, whether it wasn't taking care of their health or using drugs or living dangerously, accidents, things like that, I've never had as many people tell me, souls on the other side who have passed over, that they kind of had a sense that what they were doing may lead to their passing. But if it did, it did.
So they're willing to take the risk because there was enough pain and enough dysfunction going on that
exactly,
it's okay if it goes that way. Interesting.
Right.
Well, one thing that you say right in the beginning of your book, which is a wonderful book, and I encourage anyone to pick it up.
Thank you.
If you're having to contemplate your passing or someone else's passing and see the beauty of this process from the
Mm.
other side is that no matter what the quality of your life is, as a human being, you pass over into the arms of love. Even if it might take a minute or two for some more than others, you're always passing over into this love. And if we could just start the conversation there.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, that's the right word for it. It's a beautiful process. It's a process that, beauty is an attribute of God that we don't often consider. We think of beauty a lot here in superficial ways, but there's a beauty of the soul. There's a beauty of the heart when it opens, when it connects, when we are able to merge with a greater love, with a love that many of us haven't really had a very strong connection with in this physical life. We get to see ourselves and feel ourselves through a different lens than we do in the physical world. In the physical world, we see ourselves with judgment and competitiveness and our faults and our criticisms and what we've done. And we try hard to have better self-esteem and to love ourselves. But immediately, like you said, it's easy because it's just there. It's like oxygen. It's something that opens us and we embrace. And it feels so, I know this feeling in different ways through others who have passed over, but it is something that is hard to really understand in our human self, what that's really like. But it is consistent. Like you said, no matter the life that someone lived here, that's what awaits us.
Yes. And oftentimes, as you have said in the book, people are surprised because we all have an idea of what's going to happen when we pass, what it's like on the other side, or in the case of atheists or agnostics,
Right.
nothing's going to happen, dust to dust, which can be quite a shocker for someone to find out, oops, I'm still here. I listened to a video by a man recently on YouTube Mellen, Mellen, someone who talks about this, and he was a diehard atheist and talks about the shock and beauty of what happened when he went over. But he first went through some kind of darkness because he expected darkness. Let's talk about expectation and people being kind of shocked and awed once they get over there.
Yeah. What we want to have happen or expect to have happen during that transition time from the consciousness of more ego human self to soul self, it doesn't usually last for a very long time, although we can be stubborn and kind of really hold on to the belief. But for a time, as we pass over, we do experience what we expect to experience. Fortunately, most of the time, that's positive. Most of the time, that will have to do with seeing loved ones, or being with God, or being with Jesus, or being with the angels. But like you said, that's absolutely right. For a fair number of people, there's emptiness. And one of the reasons that sometimes people resist making that transition, even after they pass over into the light, is because they're so sure that what they're going to experience is not good because of the way they lived and the religion that they had here, that, they have done something or had secrets or whatever it is that was going to, on the other side, be judged.
Right.
And that's sad. That's very, very sad when people experience that. But we do experience our beliefs, whether they're positive or difficult, in that way.
You did write about that in the book, that there are some people who are afraid of going to the light because they're afraid of judgment and the judgment day that they've heard about.
Right.
And they're afraid they're going to come up short and be viewed poorly on the other side, which is really quite sad, because if we only understood everyone's in the human game, everyone has challenges. We've all done stuff throughout our incarnations.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that for anyone that actually has that fear right now?
Some fear is normal. It's the ego. The ego will fear passing over because it to the ego, it is in a way, death, because the ego will not sustain itself in higher vibrations. So that a lot of the fear comes from that part of us that feels it is in charge, that feels that going into the unknown, it won't exist. But we have to remember that even despite the fear we may feel, there's a part of us that is the greater part of us is soul. It is spirit. And that part of us is connected to that higher vibration of love that is incredibly compassionate and far-reaching.
Yes.
And the other thing that is very helpful, I think, too, and people tend to be able to grasp this more, I've found, is because, we move from material consciousness, physical consciousness. Sometimes before we can go into spiritual consciousness, we go into mental consciousness, mind consciousness. And sometimes people will be able to better understand that much of what we've done, some of the lessons that we've lived, some of the heartaches we've had have been with us for a higher purpose, that we've orchestrated that on some level in order to experience something that in some way would benefit our soul. And when we can kind of understand sometimes that it's not about right and wrong and judgment, because that's physical consciousness, but it's about love, understanding, growth, evolution, then people sometimes can understand that, okay, maybe, I get that on that level of understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on another level, when we're talking about when people cross over, they're kind of living out a program they expect. Many people who've written books about crossing over say, "Oh, I met with Jesus on the other side, and
Right.
Jesus told me this," and they're Christian. And this will be inevitably someone who has a Christian background,
Right.
and this is understandable. And I want to ask you something particular about that. But I want to bring up in Ruth Montgomery's book from the 1960s, A World Beyond. I remember Arthur Ford, the medium, the man on the other side, who was the medium now talking to her through automatic writing, telling her it was so interesting to see how people experience the notion that they are out of body. And he watched this one woman. He said, time isn't time, but it seemed like day after day to him. All she did was iron. She was ironing clothing just like she did in this incarnation. So let's speak to that for a moment. And then the notion of what's actually happening. Obviously, it seems to me that Buddha and Krishna and Christ and all these beings may not be physically appearing to every person that's dying on a given planet, but there is some aspect, there's something that's projecting itself through for that comfort. In your understanding, what's that about?
Absolutely. Well, let's begin with the ironing, because I love that you brought that up. And I talk about this a little bit in the book too, about how, we can completely recreate the life we had here. And a lot do. The people that have not had a higher understanding spiritually, or even invested much of their thought or experience with that, usually will go to the other side. And sometimes I've found they'll go to a house that they loved in childhood. They'll even go back to their childhood, a time when they felt the best, and they'll live near their grandmother or someone, or they'll be in a marriage situation that they had a long-term marriage with, and they do the things they did here. Eventually what happens is its soul becomes very bored. Eventually what happens when we are repetitive and we recreate what we experienced here, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it becomes like the ironing over and over. It becomes boring. And that's when we tend to really wake up to the possibilities.
So let's pick up on that and what's happening when we're expecting to see Krishna or Buddha or Christ.
Well, what I found is that the form that we see is, I don't want to say it's a projection, because there is something of substance behind that. It is a loving presence. A lot of times spirit will come to us in the form that we will accept, that we will open our heart to. And if we trust and love Jesus, then, you know, the all that is, the great spirit, whatever we want to call the creative force of love that is so much greater than the human self, will come to people in that form. Now, what's interesting, though, is a lot of times people will tell me that their spirit guides are incredibly handsome.
Yeah.
And I've had clients say, you know, I think I'm falling in love with my spirit guide. And they're a little embarrassed about it, and almost like, well, is that natural? And the funny thing is absolutely, they do that purposely. So we do fall in love with them. Falling in love in the other side is what we do. And it's not about one person we fall in love with and we have all the drama. It's really that feeling of that complete surrender to love. And so some people will feel too, when they pass over, that they encounter these incredibly beautiful angels, you know, beautiful, and they fall in love with them. They might fall in love with Jesus. They might, whoever it is, the point is to open the heart and feel that love.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so well said. So now what happens when we have one of these beings and they're meeting with us and they start telling us things that contain a fair amount of wisdom, for example, to our understanding? They're uttering wise words to us. Now, is that necessarily external or a guide, for example, or might that be our own higher self, our own highest aspect and soul reflecting through an image back to us?
Absolutely. It could be both, and it could be the same thing, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. At some level of our vibration, our very high self vibration, we cease to be, it's hard to explain, because in our human way of reasoning and thinking, we really feel that I am me and you are you, and I'm here and you're there, and we are not merged. You know, we are not merged. We are separate beings. At some level, though, at our higher self, we are merging. We're merging with higher consciousness. We're merging. We're not separate and apart. We are, and we're loving it. That's the thing. We're not losing our individuality in that. We are like a flock of birds that are all in unison. We have our individuality, but we're flowing in a rhythm that has meaning, that has purpose, that has vibration, that has pattern, that has beauty. And so our thoughts merge with that. So that's why I say it could be both. It could be our higher self merging with that greater substance, that greater energy, power, whatever we want to call it, and communicating to us at our lower vibration, encouraging our lower vibration to kind of like, come on, join us. Let's live it up. Join us up here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then conversely, that when we are in a situation where someone passes over, as we mentioned a while ago, and this is now, we're going to talk just a little bit about its impact on us. Right. And that is when someone passes over and they're unsettled or confused or afraid to go with the light and haven't really loosened up to let the process take them forward, that we ourselves can often feel the state of where a person is that we've been close to once they pass over, whether it's that or whether there's a joy in the release. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I did. That's one of the beautiful, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's one of the most beautiful things I've seen, that people don't realize it's happening a lot of time. And I experienced it. I talk about this at the beginning of the book, when I had an ex-husband of mine pass over. And because I'm able to communicate with the other side, I was at an advantage because I knew what was happening, but a lot of people don't. But I felt it was, we would talk a bit, and I felt his transition into higher awareness, into understanding what he was experiencing and what happened to him in the physical life in terms of the lessons and what his experiences were here when he was focusing on our relationship. I was focusing on our relationship too, not because I knew he was. It was just something that I later realized that we were both working on at the same time. And we were doing it in a way that was helping both of us heal, helping us both understand what we could have done different, what we brought to this, what we learned from this, what we were, challenged with karmically too. And I realized as I figured that out, I realized my clients were experiencing that too. That I would bring things up and they would say, oh yeah, well, I had a dream about that, or I was thinking about that too. If the person on the other side started talking about some memories they had or apologizing for something. And so I realized that, and I talk a bit about this in the book, about how much we are merged with those we love. We're intertwined with them energetically, so that when they pass over, that energetic shift is no longer physical based, it becomes spiritual based. But it's still there, it still exists. So we can really benefit greatly from loved ones on the other side who heal. Mm-hmm. We really can, if we allow ourselves to go along with that journey with them, in our own healing with them, instead of holding on to resentments, problems, things that happen, victimization, things like that. It takes a conscious working this, which is why I wrote the book and gave exercises on how to do that. And part of the motivation with the book too was that I thought, we're not taking advantage really here of a wonderful gift we can have with our own happiness here in physical life, because the other side can help us quite a bit with that.
Yeah.
They really, but we have to do the work with it too. But there's an extra added presence and power that motivates it, that helps us along with it.
Yeah, and that's not something you hear often talked about, and that kinds of yeah. And it brings us to the subject of this notion of the continuity of our relationship with loved ones throughout time, and that it's something that I have come to understand and have found through the years the practical nature of reincarnation with soul groups. And you write about this in the book very beautifully, and that when we talked about this off camera, where you had said, look, this is just a chapter in the book. Any given lifetime in a relationship with someone is just a chapter. You wouldn't just quit the book after a chapter. There's so much more to be done. So let's talk about the notion we tend to come back with our family and soul group members over and over again, because some would say if it's a bad dynamic, why would we do that?
Yeah, why would we do that? Because our soul's in charge. And that's why. It's because we certainly on an ego level would not want to do that. But we definitely, it's challenging. It's kind of, we realize actually how powerful we are when we realize that we kind of set up our difficulties, knowing that we can get through them, knowing that's what is going to bring our power out, is getting through them, to help us to realize who we really are. It's not done to cause us pain and problems. It's of course, pain leads us to solutions, but it's really done to help us to embrace our power and to know more of who we really are. I'm going to give you a really good example right now, because this morning I thought of this. I have had a difficult relationship with my sister. She's a little older than me, but from the very beginning, it's been, I don't feel I've engaged in this as much as she has, but very competitive from her. But again, I probably have. But this past week, which I'm not going to get into great details about this, but she has kind of triangulated me with one of my brothers in the way that I'm kind of cut out of it. It's I'm just not invited. I'm just,
Right.
And my feelings were hurt. I'm not even told about things they're doing, and she lives very close to me. And, it's just become difficult because I've not been a part of this. I haven't had the option to be. And then this morning, I realized that I had done a past life years ago where I realized that I had a past life with her. And I'm not proud to say this by any means, but I remember I was, I won't go into the whole thing, but I basically had an affair with her husband.
Well, that'll sting into the future.
So you're right. Exactly. So this morning it clicked with me. I thought, but you know what? I probably brought this on anyway. And so I'm just going to have to suck it up and get through this. I'm not a victim here. This is what it feels like. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to have to just let this go and not feel like, oh, what are you doing to me? But I just wanted to bring that up as an example of how it can help us to realize that in a soul group are incarnations with difficult people who we sometimes think, why are they being so mean to us? Why is that happening? Why do I dislike this person so much? There's more to it in that.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so much more to it. And when we can get to the place where we can accept that that is something that we do need to experience, and that's a hard place to get to. And it's not saying I deserve it. There's a very big difference, but saying, oh, I deserve mistreatment,
absolutely.
Or saying this is an experience I can move through and be better for it, to keep my heart open, to keep loving, to just accept it.
I hope you're enjoying this video, because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks.
I'll just toss in a little anecdote too from my son. He was just under 4 years old, and one day I said, I was thinking of a past life where I was aware that I had not been a very good mother to him. And this particular day, I was just feeling a little melancholy, and he was happy. He was building a fort with all the cushions on the sofa and love seat, right? Doing his thing. I said, honey, I know I'm not very much fun right this moment, and I don't ever want to treat you anything other than wonderfully, because there was a time when I could have done better. And he just kept building his fort, and he said, with his little adenoids, that's okay, Bob. I did it to you too. No, or just like, what? He said, oh, yeah, when I was your daddy. And
really? Oh, yes. Wow.
And I said, okay, well, now can you tell me? And he did not read till quite late. He was very dyslexic and everything. And he said, oh, yeah. I said, where were we? And he said, well, a place called England. And I said, oh, and can you see the house? He said it was a little brick house, a real short brick house. And he started telling me his clothing and everything. And
wow.
Honey, when did you see this? He said, oh, I was supposed to be taking a nap at Busy Bee, his nursery school. And he said, and I saw this, and he said, and you were the oldest, the mommy died, and you were the oldest kid, and I used to beat you up because I was mad. And I thought, interesting. So then later on in life, I thought I was maybe a male. It turns out I was the daughter who reminded him of his deceased wife. And so a lot of responsibility fell on me. So I bring this up
That's a
because
great story. That's a wonderful
yeah,
story.
chicken or egg. We come back in these cycles and do these things until we learn. And if you have any other kind of wonderful, rich stories about this, because we're all in it, we're all in it.
We're
About
all in
how
it.
those
That's for
work,
sure.
I would love to. People love stories. So,
Mhm.
any other anecdote you know of to just kind of illustrate the incredible genius of the soul to keep wrapping us back into
It
this?
is amazing. It is really amazing. Let me just say this, though. I really, in my own experience, what I've really learned is that it feels to me that it's, I used to think more that it's, a lesson we have to, and we do, but it's also, but the lesson is always love too.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, always love. And I have to stay centered in that, because I feel in this lifetime, I came back with a charged karmic group, my family group, and others growing up. Has been a very, very difficult uh, family, very difficult in so many ways. Geez, I have so many personal stories. Let me bring this one in, though, because this was one of the most unexpected things that happened. I was, it's a long story. I'll keep it short, though. I was going to a healer because I was having a problem with breathing. I kept choking for some reason, for no reason. And so we did this breathing work where I was breathing rapidly and at the same time going into whatever memories, whatever was causing that. And I went into this memory where my mother actually choked me, and actually I died, which,
Okay.
yeah, I was very young. And I just was crying and crying and crying. I remember but there was so much grief that I had been through that, because I could feel her anger and her wanting me not to be here any longer. And I remember I was lying there, and the healer was sitting next to me. She was very loving, very compassionate, and I'm like, oh, snotty and crying. And feeling really like a victim, feeling really like poor me. And I remember asking my guides as I was lying there, and I remember saying to them something like, I don't know, I wanted love, I wanted comfort for them. Like, well, basically, like, why did this happen? Why would I pick them? That's what it was. Why would I pick a mother like this? Why would I do this? And I could never forget the answer, because it stunned me, and it still stuns me. One of my guides said very loudly, if you want to suffer about this, suffer. It's up to you. And I was so angry. I was so mad that this guide said this to me. I'm like, what do you mean I want to suffer? I don't want to suffer. And they're like, well, maybe you do. Maybe you do. I was like livid. And then I said something like, well, then why did I pick this family? And the answer was so interesting. The answer was for the genes. You needed the genes of the family.
Interesting. And that brings up a couple points.
Yeah.
I was listening to a reading of another friend of mine through someone I respected greatly, who was a very highly skilled channeler. And she was asking about her son. She said, we don't understand him. He has nothing in common with us.
Mm-hmm.
And said, oh, no, he has not been in your soul group before. He chose you for the opportunity and for the genes. You would give him an easy path toward what he wishes to do in this lifetime. So you were chosen for that reason, not because there's any familiarity or a previous connection with him, and which I thought was interesting. Then in your book, you wrote about how souls who are of service and souls who are of an advanced nature will often come in to offer something special to a family to help break up really dysfunctional emotional patterns.
Right.
In the case of what you just said, to literally insert a DNA into the pool, for example, of a family that has a particular chronic health issue in their bloodline.
Right,
And
absolutely.
that was really fascinating. Let's talk about that for a minute.
I think we had a conversation yesterday where we were talking about how, some souls will come in, like, kind of what we were just talking about, and contribute, make change in some way. And we were talking about how I think that some, we don't always make a beeline back into the physical world when we pass over. Most don't. Most don't necessarily even want to come back. And I was thinking about it after our conversation, because the exception to that is that the souls that have purpose here, the souls that want to come back to make a difference, are more likely to wave their hand, sign up, and say, no, I want to go back. And very courageous, loving souls will enter a family where there's been long-term abuse, long-term addictions is where I see it a lot, where there's so much embedded in a very deep DNA level, almost, with addictions patterns, that a soul will come in and be the one that maybe struggled a little bit with it, but got through it. And they start to shift the energy of addictive energy too.
They like way showers within the tribe.
Yeah, they definitely, and it's an act of love. It's an act of love to do that. And it's also, like, we're talking about an act of love to come into a family where there has been long-term specific illnesses too, and to really lift the vibration. The funny thing is, those people that do that are usually really not very well loved in the family.
Well, they're usually strangers, just like the boy.
Yeah, and they're usually, they're either strangers or they're resented.
The black sheep.
Black sheep. Yeah. The different one who's not understood. Right.
Exactly. And did you feel that way in your family? Because certainly you don't have a normal life.
No, well, there's no doubt I'm still the black sheep in my family. Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of people watching this who have chosen to go outside of coloring outside the lines and look for answers in other ways, many people watching this right now will relate to that and feel the same way. And again, besides coming in to help lift a family, or to come in because there's some DNA that you could use, right? Or there is an opportunity because of their educational history that you're going to be given access to something. Any other reasons why we might incarnate into a family in which we end up feeling as the black sheep?
Well, I would say that we might need to have that experience in order to, I see it sometimes when people really need to assert their individuality and trust themselves, where they have lived lives where it's been very much a collective consciousness, where they have done things that the group has done, that they have not really honed in on their own individuality and made decisions and choices to kind of move out of a certain form and accepted others' beliefs or others' thoughts of who they should be and what they should be doing. And so sometimes those souls will incarnate in a family where it's very difficult for them to do that. They're not able to. It's very blatantly clear that if I buy into what my family thinks of me, I'm really suffering.
Right.
Or I'm really not that person, and I know I'm not. And so they will have to really find their power, really find their individuality and their voice. And sometimes it takes that to really find it too.
Yeah, and I think many people listening to this are hearing your words loud and clear. And, you know, we could literally talk for days about these subjects, and we both have tons of anecdotes to share of others and ourselves. But what I want to get to before we say goodbye is the notion that when we on this side lose someone and go into a state of grief, we may not understand it, but this actually has a silver lining to it, because it often opens up our own intuitive capacities, that vulnerability. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. 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 That's probably one of the consistent gifts that we discover if we are able to truly grieve, consciously grieve. Conscious grieving, and it's not easy to do. Conscious grieving is really sitting with our pain and really letting ourselves, feeling our heart, not closing it, not pulling it away, not preoccupying ourselves. And all of that is fine a little bit. All of us will do that some, but really going back to the heart, really going back to the center and feeling, I want to be open. I want to allow and to feel my loved ones on the other side. I want to know what's beyond here. And it brings those questions up for us that usually in life, there's not a lot in life that bring those questions up. But opening the heart, you know, I think it was Buddha. There was a very high enlightened teacher that said that, I think it was Buddha that, was suffering. It's suffering that opens our heart, that brings in that transcendent, that brings in that enlightenment. And it's really true when we have a loved one pass over. If we are able to let our heart open and grieve, it's amazing how much we begin to experience ourselves in different ways, and to experience our loved ones, to really feel them, to really have a sense they're with me, even if I can't see them, or even if I don't know them in the way I knew them there, I can feel something. Yeah.
And the whole notion that when someone departs, we lose our bearings. We
sure do.
Lose any sense of control over anything, all of our moorings. And once that's gone and we're left stripped bare and vulnerable to feel ourselves, that's when you say these beings can really come in and be available to us in ways that they weren't able to even when they were embodied necessarily. They can often do more for us in our relationship and reinforcing that love bond from the other side than from in the earth life, right?
Oh, absolutely. Let me tell you a quick story about this. The ex-husband I was talking about, we had not been, soon after our divorce, he passed over. And I have a daughter that was from another marriage. That was not her father. And Kenny Hairston was my ex that I'm talking about. And he was a musician, and he played in the original Cyndi Lauper band. So he had traveled all over. There's videos of him. He was a great musician. After that, he went into composing. So he was this amazing musician. And he traveled the world with Cyndi at the whole Girls Want to Have Fun thing. And he would always say to me, your daughter is like my daughter. She feels like my daughter. Well, my daughter, if she was here, she would tell you that almost she feels her life changed for the better in amazing ways. She's going to the White House next week to meet the president and the vice president, because she was the teacher of the year in North Carolina. Now, she attributes all of that to him. And one of the ways she does is because she says, Mom, I can't believe it. When anything good happens to me, or right before it happens, I hear the music on the radio that
chills. I love it.
Yeah, like, I always hear like Girls Want to Have Fun, or whatever it was that he had been, in the band with and singing, because he was also did vocals. And my daughter is different than me in the way that she knows who I am, but she's a little bit more, teacher of the year and this and that. but she will, it's so funny, she really attributes every good thing to, oh, that was Kenny. I got in the car, Mom, and I turned on the radio, and there he is singing. I just know it's him.
I love it. That gives, I mean, everything you've spoken about, it gives us so much to think about and so much to start, you know, opening ourselves to, instead of just this reality where so many people are feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling just cast out, misunderstood, divided from ones they used to be with, and all this. Just the notion that we can open up to this whole other realm of spirit that's always there, it's always there for us, is really comforting and beautiful. And just before we say goodbye, I just want to add one thing, and this includes our little furry friends too. Our little furry friends go over and they can greet us as well, right? And they come with us and they accompany us, and their love is there.
Oh, absolutely. And they actually can bring, in fact, I know we don't have time, but let me say very quickly, this morning, before we did the show, I did a reading for a woman who, she kept telling me, you know, my dog Maggie I keep dreaming about Maggie. I keep dreaming. She loves Maggie. She passed over not that long ago, and I won't go into it. We know we don't have time, but she feels that Maggie is so important to her now in her growth. That Maggie keeps bringing her all of these beautiful, wonderful blessings into her life.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Just to put that out there. So include your furry friends, your
absolutely
furry friends that you love in the group that's there to support us all the time. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye, Sherrie?
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. The one final thing I'd like to say is that, you know, we started the interview with the despair, with the difficulties, with the hopelessness. I think one of the beautiful things that's happening, despite the suffering that's also happening, is that, like you just said, we are becoming, this is forcing us almost to become aware of different spiritual solutions. It's not just talk and a fun club to be in, you know, a spiritual. It's something we need. It's something I think we're awakening to on a whole different level, that it's not out there. It's something that we need within us, within our physical lives, within our day-to-day life.
Thank you for that. We absolutely do. And Sherrie, I just want to say, just for anyone watching, right now you are inundated with personal readings to the point where you're already booked a year out. So no need for people to try to squeeze in for a reading. You're running out on that level. Your dance card is punched and full. But your book really helps people guide themselves into how they can communicate themselves with their loved ones. So I highly encourage people to pick it up. And it's called I'm Still With You. And that's such an appropriate phrase. I've said this to many people who are talking about their deceased ones. Be careful what you're saying. They are still with you. They're right here with us right now. So it's a really good reminder, and a wonderful study book as well. So I want to thank you for your time and effort to put that book together for the rest of us, and also for sharing your perspectives today, Sherrie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, I hope this has added a lot of comfort to your own life and to your own understanding of your journey ahead and the journey of those who have gone before you. Again, the name of the book is I'm Still With You by Sherrie Dillard. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com.